My family mocked me at my father's funeral. But his will changed everything that day. The rain hadn't stopped since dawn. Inside the church, the scent of lilies mixed with whispers sharp enough to cut. I could hear them, my cousins laughing under their breath, calling me the disappointment, the one who never deserved to carry Dad's name. I stood alone near the casket, my palms trembling against the folded letter he'd left just for me. I didn't know what it said, only that Dad made the lawyer promise it would be read after the funeral. Their laughter grew louder, echoing between the stained glass windows, as if even grief had rejected me. But as the service ended and the lawyer rose, clearing his throat, silence fell across the room. The air shifted. My heart raced, whatever my father had written in that will. It wasn't forgiveness. It was something far greater. No one in that room knew. The real storm hadn't even begun. Before that bitter morning, my father's compound was a place of laughter and dust, where children chased goats across the yard and the smell of roasted maize drifted with the evening wind. In our village, people said my father's name with both fear and respect. Chief Alumide Adewale, the man whose word could settle disputes faster than the elders' council, whose wealth built the school and the borehole by the river. To the world, he was strength itself. To me, he was a shadow I could never reach. Since my mother's death, the compound had grown cold. My uncles and their wives filled it with noise, but not warmth. Every visit turned into quiet judgment, the sideways glances, the whispers about how I'd become too soft, how I would never live up to my father's legacy. They saw me as a burden, the quiet son who left for the city to study books instead of learning the family trade. When father fell ill, the laughter in that house turned sharp. Everyone returned, each pretending to care, but their eyes were already counting what would be left behind. Goats were slaughtered, prayers were said, and each night I watched them, aunts, cousins, and in-laws, moving like shadows through his room, speaking to him in low voices when they thought I was asleep. I remember the night before he passed. The air was heavy, filled with the scent of rain and old medicine. Father called me into his room, his voice barely a whisper. "Io," he said, using my name like it carried the last of his breath. "They mocked you because they never understood what I saw in you. When I am gone, they will learn." He pressed a small envelope into my hand, brown, sealed, and marked with his thumbprint. "Give this to the lawyer when they call for the reading," he said. His eyes shone like dying embers. "And whatever happens, do not bow your head." By morning, he was gone. The funeral day arrived with clouds as dark as mourning cloth. The compound overflowed with mourners, elders in white agbadas, women wailing, drummers beating slowly in the distance. Smoke rose from the cooking fires, mixing with the scent of palm wine and dust. My uncles moved around like kings, shaking hands, giving orders, pretending to grieve louder than everyone else. And me? I stood near the gate, forgotten. No one offered me food, no one spoke kindly. When I tried to sit near the family mat, one of my cousins hissed, "That seat is for men who stayed behind." I swallowed the insult like medicine. I had learned long ago that silence was its own kind of strength, but deep inside, something was changing. I kept thinking about that envelope in the lawyer's briefcase, the one father had trusted only me to deliver. He must have known what would happen. He must have known the greed that hid behind their crocodile tears. As the sun dipped low and the final prayers ended, I looked across the compound at faces that once called me brother. They were already arguing about who would keep the cars, the land, the money. My aunt, Mama Folake, even whispered that I would be lucky to get a single room from the estate. I smiled quietly to myself, remembering Father's last words, "They will learn." The lawyer's car arrived just as the drummers stopped. A hush swept through the crowd. The man stepped out, wearing a gray suit and carrying a worn leather case. My uncle greeted him loudly, as though the will already belonged to him, but the lawyer's eyes found mine. He gave a small nod, the kind that says, "It's time." None of them knew what was about to be read. None of them expected my father to have the final word, and as I followed the lawyer toward the main hall, I could feel the eyes of the family on my back, burning with curiosity, envy, and fear. What they didn't know was that the letter inside that briefcase would shatter everything they believed about blood, loyalty, and legacy.
Before that bitter morning, my father's compound was a place of laughter and dust, where children chased goats across the yard and the smell of roasted maize drifted with the evening wind. In our village, people said my father's name with both fear and respect. Chief Alyamide Adewale, the man whose word could settle disputes faster than the elders' council, whose wealth built the school and the borehole by the river. To the world, he was strength itself. To me, he was a shadow I could never reach. Since my mother's death, the compound had grown cold. My uncles and their wives filled it with noise, but not warmth. Every visit turned into quiet judgment, the sideways glances, the whispers about how I'd become too soft, how I would never live up to my father's legacy. They saw me as a burden, the quiet son who left for the city to study books instead of learning the family trade. When father fell ill, the laughter in that house turned sharp. Everyone returned, each pretending to care, but their eyes were already counting what would be left behind. Goats were slaughtered, prayers were said, and each night I watched them, aunts, cousins, and in-laws, moving like shadows through his room, speaking to him in low voices when they thought I was asleep. I remember the night before he passed. The air was heavy, filled with the scent of rain and old medicine. Father called me into his room, his voice barely a whisper. "Ayo," he said, using my name like it carried the last of his breath. "They mocked you because they never understood what I saw in you. When I am gone, they will learn." He pressed a small envelope into my hand, brown, sealed, and marked with his thumbprint. "Give this to the lawyer when they call for the reading," he said. His eyes shone like dying embers. "And whatever happens, do not bow your head." By morning, he was gone. The funeral day arrived with clouds as dark as mourning cloth. The compound overflowed with mourners, elders in white igbatas, women wailing, drummers beating slowly in the distance. Smoke rose from the cooking fires, mixing with the scent of palm wine and dust. My uncles moved around like kings, shaking hands, giving orders, pretending to grieve louder than everyone else. And me. I stood near the gate, forgotten. No one offered me food. No one spoke kindly. When I tried to sit near the family mat, one of my cousins hissed, "That seat is for men who stayed behind." I swallowed the insult like medicine. I had learned long ago that silence was its own kind of strength. But deep inside, something was changing. I kept thinking about that envelope in the lawyer's briefcase, the one father had trusted only me to deliver. He must have known what would happen. He must have known the greed that hid behind their crocodile tears. As the sun dipped low and the final prayers ended, I looked across the compound at faces that once called me brother. They were already arguing about who would keep the cars, the land, the money. My aunt, Mama Folake, even whispered that I would be lucky to get a single room from the estate. I smiled quietly to myself, remembering father's last words, "They will learn." The lawyer's car arrived just as the drummers stopped. A hush swept through the crowd. The man stepped out, wearing a gray suit and carrying a worn leather case. My uncle greeted him loudly, as though the will already belonged to him. But the lawyer's eyes found mine. He gave a small nod, the kind that says, "It's time." None of them knew what was about to be read. None of them expected my father to have the final word. And as I followed the lawyer toward the main hall, I could feel the eyes of the family on my back, burning with curiosity, envy, and fear. What they didn't know was that the letter inside that briefcase would shatter everything they believed about blood, loyalty, and legacy. The hall was thick with the smell of sweat, perfume, and grief. The lawyer placed his leather case on the table in front of my father's portrait, a proud picture of Chief Alyamide in his blue agbada, smiling like he still ruled the room. Everyone gathered close, pretending to pray but hungry for what was coming. My uncles sat in the front row, their wives fanning themselves with pride. Cousins whispered behind me, mocking my plain clothes. "See him," one muttered. "He can't even afford a proper agbada for his own father's burial." The others snickered. The lawyer adjusted his glasses. "My name is Barrister Ayadil, legal representative of the late Chief Alyamide Adewale," he began. "The chief prepared this will in my office 3 months before his passing. He instructed that it be read publicly, before witnesses." The room went silent. Even the ceiling fan seemed to stop turning. He opened the first page and began to read. "I, Chief Alyamide Adewale, being of sound mind, declare this as my final will and testament." He listed the usual things first: donations to the church, money for the community school, a small portion for the workers who had served faithfully. The family listened half-heartedly, waiting for the real part. Then came the first crack in their calm. To my brother, Alhaji Bode, who stood by me in times of prosperity but forgot me in sickness, I leave the 2 acres of farmland in Ijero and nothing more. A gasp spread through the room. My uncle's fan dropped from his hand. "What nonsense is this?" he shouted. "This is not the chief's handwriting." The lawyer ignored him and continued reading. To my nephews and nieces who mocked my son and counted my wealth before my burial, I leave my blessings, and may they use it wisely, since they already believe they own everything. The laughter that once filled the room vanished like smoke. My cousins shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting toward me. I kept my gaze fixed on the lawyer's mouth, pretending calm, though my heart was pounding like a talking drum. Then came the words that changed everything. To my only son, Ao Adewale, whom many have mocked for choosing wisdom over pride, I leave the entirety of my estate, the houses, the factory, the lands, and the accounts. But this inheritance shall come with a test. A murmur rippled through the hall. The lawyer continued. The chief instructed that the contents of his sealed letter be read next. He lifted the small brown envelope, the same one my father had given me, with trembling hands. My chest tightened. The lawyer broke the seal, unfolded the letter, and began to read aloud. "My son, if you are hearing this, then I have gone to where our ancestors wait. Do not cry for me. Cry instead for those who let greed blind them. You have been mocked, but you carry my spirit, not in wealth, but in patience and truth. Let them hear what they forgot, that everything a man owns means nothing if he loses his honor. There is one more thing they must know, something I kept hidden until today." He paused. The entire room leaned in. Ao is not the only child of my blood. Many years ago, I wronged a woman named Abibi. She bore me a daughter whom I never claimed. I have searched for her, and before my death, I found her. Her name is Tenny. She is to be treated as family, and she shall inherit equally beside Ao. Gasps. Murmurs. The room erupted. My aunt leapt to her feet. "A bastard? You expect us to share the Adewale name with a child born from shame?" Someone shouted, "He forged this will." Another yelled, "Bring the lawyer's papers. We must see the seal." The lawyer slammed his hand on the table. "Silence! The chief's seal is on every page, witnessed and certified." I could feel eyes burning holes into me. I hadn't known about the daughter either. My head spun. I tried to picture her, a stranger who shared my blood. "Who is this girl?" my uncle demanded. "Where is she now?" The lawyer replied calmly, "She is here. The chief brought her home before he died. She waits outside." Every head turned toward the doorway. The double doors opened slowly, and there she was, a young woman no older than 22, wearing a simple wrapper and white blouse, her eyes wide but steady. The murmurs turned to a roar. "She looks like her mother." "No, no, look at the eyes, she has the chief's eyes." "Impossible." Tenny stepped forward. Her hands shook, but her chin lifted high. "I didn't come for your money," she said softly. "I came because my father asked me to." Her voice was gentle, yet it cut through the noise. My cousins sneered, whispering cruel words. One even spat on the floor near her feet. I clenched my fists. My father's voice echoed in my head. "Do not bow your head." I rose slowly. "If she is my father's blood, then she is my sister," I said. "And whoever disrespects her disrespects his memory." The hall fell silent again. Even the uncles looked unsure. One of them hissed, "So the city boy now defends strangers." The lawyer folded the will and closed his briefcase. "The chief's words are final. The inheritance will be processed accordingly." As he walked out, the family began arguing loudly, voices overlapping like a market crowd. Some accused me of bribery, others swore the girl was an imposter. But deep down, I saw what they truly feared, the end of their control. That night, the compound that once belonged to my father turned into a battlefield of whispers. I heard them plotting through the walls, plans to contest the will, to deal with the girl, to teach Ao a lesson. I sat awake, staring at the flickering lantern, the lawyer's words replaying in my mind. The storm had truly begun, not outside, but within the family itself. By dawn, someone would act on those whispers. That night, the rain came. Heavy, unending, as if the ancestors themselves were washing the compound clean. I sat under the veranda, watching the drops slide off the rusted roof, when I heard soft footsteps behind me. It was Tenny. She stood in the doorway, her wrapper soaked from the storm, her eyes tired but gentle. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us carried too many ghosts. "I didn't know he found you," I said finally. She nodded. "He came to Abaddon 3 months before he died. He told me he was sorry for everything. He said I would meet my brother one day, and that I should be brave when I do." Her words struck like a whisper from the grave. I studied her face, the curve of her nose, the small scar above her eyebrow. There it was again, the reflection of my father. "I didn't come here to take what's yours," she said, her voice trembling. "I only came to honor him." I shook my head slowly. "It's not mine. It was never about the land or the cars. He left something else, something they can't touch." The thunder rumbled in the distance. Suddenly, a shadow moved near the gate. Voices, low, angry. I caught a few words through the sound of rain. "Finish it tonight, before she brings shame to this family." Tenny froze. "Who are they?" "My uncles," I whispered. "They will not stop until the will is destroyed." I told her to stay inside while I went to confront them, but she grabbed my arm. "He said we must stand together," she pleaded. "He said they only win when we fight each other." Her words steadied me. I stepped out into the rain. My uncles and 2 cousins were by the old carport, holding lanterns and muttering. When they saw me, their faces hardened. "Ayo," my uncle said, "you have brought shame to this house. That girl is no child of your father. She is a curse." "If she is a curse," I said, "then so am I, because he chose her, just as he chose me." The younger cousin lunged forward. "You think the chief's wealth belongs to a stranger and a weakling?" Before he could reach me, lightning cracked across the sky, blinding white. The lantern fell, spilling oil and fire. Chaos erupted as the men stumbled back. The flames licked at the wet ground, sparks dancing in the rain. Tenny ran out from the house, shouting my name. She held the chief's framed photo to her chest, the one from the will reading. "Stop this madness," she cried. "His spirit is watching you." The wind howled through the compound. My uncle, trembling, stared at her, at the picture she held, and for a moment his pride broke. The others lowered their heads. In that instant, something shifted. The rain softened. The fire hissed out. And for the first time since my father's death, silence filled the air. Not anger, not accusation, just silence. Tenny stepped closer to me. "He said the truth would hurt before it healed," she whispered. And in that silence, I finally understood what my father meant. The will wasn't written to divide us. It was written to expose us, to show who we really were when the gold was stripped away. The storm outside faded, but the one inside our hearts had just begun. By morning, the village was whispering. Word had spread that the Adewale family fought over the chief's ghost, that his son defended a stranger girl in the rain. Some said the gods would curse us for our pride. Others said the chief's spirit had returned to judge his bloodline. Inside the compound, the air was thick with fear. My uncles refused to eat, the wives murmured prayers, and even the servants kept their distance. Only Tenny moved quietly through the house, her footsteps light, her presence calm. When she passed me in the courtyard, she said softly, "They will not rest until they have destroyed what he built." She was right. By noon, the elders of the village arrived. 5 gray-haired men carrying walking sticks carved with cowries and ancestral symbols. They demanded to speak with the family. The news had reached them, a will divided, a house at war. We gathered in the courtyard beneath the big mango tree where my father once held family meetings. The sun blazed overhead, but no one dared complain. The lead elder, Baba Ojo, sat on the wooden stool and struck the ground 3 times with his staff. "Let truth sit with us today," he said. "Let no man's tongue bring shame to his father's spirit." He turned to me. Ao, son of Alyamide, we hear that your father left his wealth in your care, and that there is a girl who calls him father. Tell us your truth. I stood slowly. Yes, Baba. Her name is Tenny. She is his daughter by another woman. My father brought her home before he died and asked that she be treated as family. Gasps fluttered through the crowd. My uncle, face red with anger, stood up. Lies! That girl is nothing but an intruder. The chief never had such a daughter. She bewitched the boy to steal his inheritance. The elders murmured. One asked, "Is there proof?" The lawyer, who had returned at dawn, stepped forward with a small folder. "There is," he said. The chief recognized her in a signed affidavit. He even recorded a message before his passing. He pulled out a small device and pressed play. My father's voice, rough but strong, filled the courtyard. If my blood means anything, it lives in both of them, Ao and Tenny. Let no man divide what I joined by truth. For a moment, even the birds went silent. Then my uncle let out a bitter laugh. So the old man lost his senses before death. You think we'll sit and let this bastard take what generations built? He turned suddenly toward Tenny, who was kneeling near the elders. You, he barked. Who was your mother? Where is she buried? Speak the truth. Tenny raised her head, tears shining in her eyes. Her name was Abibi. She worked in your brother's cocoa farm. When he sent her away, she carried his child in silence. She never cursed him, she only told me, one day the truth will walk in daylight. That day is here. The crowd murmured again. Some nodded, others looked away, ashamed. The eldest of the elders, Baba Ojo, leaned on his staff. Chief Alyamide was many things, proud, stubborn, generous, and flawed. But he was no liar. If he said she is his blood, then she is his blood. My uncle slammed his fist on the ground. Never! Over my dead body. I stepped forward. Then be careful what you wish for, uncle. My father said the will was a test, not to divide us, but to reveal us. Look around you. You've turned his burial into a market of greed. The tension snapped. My cousin, the same one who had tried to strike me the night before, grabbed a machete from the wall. You think you're better than us? He shouted. You and your bastard sister? The crowd gasped. He rushed toward Tenny. Instinct moved faster than thought. I stepped in front of her. The blade caught my arm, burning with pain. Chaos broke out. Women screamed. Men shouted. The elders rose, shouting prayers to calm the madness. Two young men wrestled the cousin to the ground, pulling the machete away. Tenny knelt beside me, pressing her scarf to my wound. Why did you do that? She cried. I smiled weakly. Because that's what family does. Then, through the noise, the lawyer's voice rose again, firm, clear, final. The chief's instructions were not only for inheritance, he said. He left one last command, that if any blood is shed because of greed, his entire estate will be donated to the village, every land, every account, every car. The courtyard froze. The uncles' faces drained of color. What? One whispered. The lawyer unfolded the last page of the will. Signed and witnessed. If his family cannot live in peace, then the wealth returns to the soil that raised him. The silence that followed was deep, the kind that makes even the wind afraid to speak. My uncle sank to his knees, clutching his head. All of it gone? The elders nodded solemnly. The chief was wise, said Baba Ojo. He gave you a chance to choose love, but you chose greed. Now his wealth will serve those who never mocked his name. Tears filled my eyes, not from pain, but from the weight of his wisdom. My father had planned it all. The will was never about money. It was a mirror, and every face that looked into it now saw their true reflection. The next morning, trucks from the lawyer's office arrived. The factory gates were sealed, the title deeds signed over to the community trust. My uncles stood by helplessly as the workers cheered. The same people they'd once ignored now sang the chief's praises again. Tenny and I stood together by the mango tree, watching the sunrise. The sky glowed gold, the color of forgiveness. She said quietly, he took everything from them and gave it back to those who needed it. I nodded. He didn't just leave us wealth. He left us wisdom. And in that moment, I finally understood what it meant to carry his name, not in blood, but in truth. The days that followed felt strange, too quiet, too soft. For the first time in years, the Adewale compound no longer smelled of greed or smoke. It smelled of rain, of wood, and of beginning again. My uncles no longer walked with their shoulders high. They spoke in whispers, avoiding the eyes of the villagers. Some packed their belongings and left before dawn, too ashamed to face the world they had once ruled with pride. But the village, it came alive. Children played inside the old courtyard that once echoed with arguments. The school beside the river received new books and benches, paid for by the same estate they had tried to keep for themselves. The borehole was repaired, and the people said, the chief still gives water, even from the other side. Tenny and I worked together, helping the lawyer oversee the transition. At first, it was awkward, two strangers tied by blood and loss. But little by little, laughter returned. She had my father's way of smiling without showing his teeth. And sometimes, when the wind rustled the mango tree, I could almost hear his deep voice saying, "Now you understand, my son." One evening, as the sun bled gold across the horizon, Tenny found me sitting by his grave. She knelt beside me, setting down a small calabash of palm wine. "He said we must pour this every year," she whispered, "to remind ourselves that truth is like wine, bitter at first, but sweet when swallowed with courage." We poured together, the red liquid sinking into the soil that carried his bones. "I used to think forgiveness was weakness," I said. "But maybe it's what makes us free." Tenny smiled. "Mama used to say, the one who forgives first is the one who sleeps best." We sat in silence for a long while, listening to the drums from a distant wedding, the sound of life moving on. When the last light faded, I looked up at the stars and spoke softly, almost to myself, "You taught me to stand tall, Baba. But you also taught me to bend, so I would not break." The wind answered, cool and calm, carrying the smell of wet earth and home. From that day, the Adewale name found new meaning, no longer a symbol of wealth, but of wisdom, no longer a story of pride, but of peace. And though the world would forget the details of the will, the villagers never forgot the lesson. They would tell their children, once there was a family that lost everything to greed and found themselves again through truth. In this tale, we learn that wealth is not measured in coins or cattle. It lives in the hearts that stay true when gold begins to fade. Chief Alyamide left his children more than land. He left them the mirror of their own souls. Greed can divide a home, but truth, no matter how painful, can rebuild it stronger than before. So when the world mocks you, stand tall in silence. The storm may roar, but the rain always washes lies away. In African tales of wisdom, we remember, a good name is better than silver, and the voice of truth never dies. It only waits for someone brave enough to speak it. Until next time, my friends, may your home be rich in peace, not pride.